There is a word that the National Football League has spent decades trying to erase from its own history. Not because the word is inaccurate, not because the record does not support it, but because the word forces the most powerful sports organization in America to confront a truth that makes the people at the top of that organization deeply, profoundly uncomfortable. That word is hatred. Not the casual, competitive dislike that fans feel when a rival team beats their favorite franchise on a Sunday afternoon. Something darker than that. Something more institutional. A hatred that lived in press conferences, in courtrooms, in rule books. A hatred that came from coaches, commissioners, and owners who looked at one particular team and felt something that went well beyond football. The team they hated was the Oakland Raiders. And here's the part of the story that the NFL has never been able to reconcile, the detail that makes this entire narrative so extraordinary that it borders on impossible. The team the entire league despised, the team coaches publicly compared to criminals, the team the commissioner himself waged a decade-long war against, that team had more Hall of Fame talent assembled on a single roster at a single moment in time than almost any team in the history of professional football. 10 Hall of Famers on one team at the same time. This is the story of how that happened, and this is the story of why the NFL hated every single moment of it. To understand the hatred, you have to understand the man who built the machine that generated it. Al Davis was born in Brooklyn, New York in 1929. He grew up in a world where the rules of engagement were simple. If the system was not going to open doors for you, you went around the walls, under the floor, and through the ceiling until you found a way inside. He was a football lifer from his earliest years, willing to take any coaching job at any level, at any institution, if it meant he could be around the game he loved. He coached at Adelphi University, he coached at the Citadel, he joined the Los Angeles Chargers staff in the infant years of the American Football League, and in 1963, at the age of 32, making him the youngest head coach and general manager in professional football history, Al Davis was handed the Oakland Raiders.
They were a disaster. 3 consecutive losing seasons, average home attendance barely above 10,000 people. No identity, no culture, no fear. Davis looked at that organization and saw not a problem to be managed, but a canvas to be painted over completely. He immediately changed the uniforms. He installed the silver and black color scheme that would become one of the most recognizable visual identities in the history of American sport. And he established a philosophy, not a playbook, not a strategy, but a philosophy that would define the Raiders for the next 4 decades. Just win, baby. 3 words that sounded simple but contained an entire worldview. Davis did not care how it looked. He did not care what the other owners thought. He did not care what the commissioner said about the way his players hit or the way his team conducted its business. He cared about one thing and one thing only: the outcome on the scoreboard when the final whistle blew. Everything else was noise. Everything else was someone else's problem. He began building his roster in ways that made the rest of the league uncomfortable. Davis had a philosophy about personnel that the NFL establishment found offensive. He believed that talent existed everywhere, including in the places other teams were too proud or too frightened to look. Players other franchises had given up on. Players who had reputations that made cautious organizations flinch. Players with edge, with aggression, with something to prove to the people who had discarded them. Davis gave those players a home, and in return, those players gave him everything. When Pete Rozelle, the NFL's polished corporate commissioner, a man who believed the league's image mattered as much as its results, looked at Al Davis, he saw a direct challenge to everything he was trying to build. Rozelle wanted the NFL to be respectable, controlled, and predictable. Davis was none of those things. Their conflict began in the mid-1960s when Davis briefly served as AFL commissioner and declared open war on the NFL by poaching its players and its prestige. It continued for the next 25 years, through lawsuits and public confrontations, and a feud so consuming and so personal that when Rozelle finally announced his retirement in 1989, with tears in his eyes at an owners' meeting in Palm Springs, he cited his battle with Davis as one of the reasons he was stepping down. He described the conflict as being caught in a Vietnam affair where it never ended. Davis responded with a comment that was exactly what you'd expect from Al Davis. He said they had been fierce competitors. He said there was admiration. And then, because he could not help himself, he added just a little bit of love and emotion. That was the man who built the Oakland Raiders. Now let us understand what he actually built, because the full picture of it has never been properly laid out in a way that does it justice. Between 1967 and 1977, the Oakland Raiders went to the playoffs every single season except one. Every single year. 9 postseason appearances in 11 seasons. 4 AFL and AFC championship game appearances in a row from 1973 through 1977. No other franchise in professional football matched that level of sustained dominance during that era. Not Dallas, not Miami, not Pittsburgh. But the Raiders had a problem that their collection of talent should have made impossible. They could not win the championship. They lost to the Kansas City Chiefs in the 1969 AFL title game. They lost to the Miami Dolphins in the 1973 AFC Championship. They lost to the Steelers again in the 1974 AFC Championship. Every year they played some of the finest football in the league. Every year they came home without the trophy. The phrase that followed them everywhere, the team that could not win the big one, attached itself to this franchise like a brand, and no amount of regular season excellence could burn it off. And then came 1976. The 1976 Oakland Raiders went 13 wins and 1 loss in the regular season. They dismantled the New England Patriots in the divisional playoffs. Then they did something the league had been watching them try and fail to do for 3 consecutive years. They walked into Pittsburgh and destroyed the Steelers in the AFC Championship game, 24-7. Then they went to the Rose Bowl in Pasadena, California, and in front of 103,438 spectators, the largest Super Bowl crowd in Super Bowl history up to that point, they eliminated the Minnesota Vikings 32-14. In a tournament conducted by NFL.com in 2012, with 5.2 million votes cast across 64 teams from across the entire history of professional football, the 1976 Oakland Raiders were voted the greatest team of all time. The most hated team in the NFL was also, by public vote, the greatest team in NFL history. The irony of that is almost too perfect. Now let us name the Hall of Famers, because this is the part of the story that people still struggle to fully absorb even when you lay it out directly in front of them. On the sideline stood John Madden, who remains one of the greatest coaches in the history of the game. Under Madden, the Raiders posted an 83-22-7 record across 8 seasons, a winning percentage that only a small number of coaches in NFL history have ever matched. He was wild, intense, and completely authentic in everything he did. He coached the same way his team played, with aggression, with intelligence, and with an absolute refusal to back down from anyone. John Madden is in the Hall of Fame.
In the owner's box sat Al Davis, the man who built the machine, who fought the league in court and in the public and behind closed doors, who turned a losing franchise into the most feared organization in professional football in less than a decade. He went into the Hall of Fame in 1992. He is one of only a handful of people in NFL history to be inducted as an owner and executive. Al Davis is in the Hall of Fame. Now go to the quarterback position. Ken Stabler, the Snake. Born in Foley, Alabama, the son of a car mechanic, Stabler grew up as the kind of quarterback who seemed to understand something about the game that could not be taught in any film room or practice facility. He made decisions in the final 2 minutes of games that routinely appeared impossible beforehand and routine in hindsight. He led the Raiders to 5 consecutive AFC championship games from 1973 through 1977. He threw 27 touchdown passes in the 1976 regular season and led the AFC in passer rating. He was the NFL Most Valuable Player in 1974. When he retired, his career completion percentage was second in NFL history, trailing only Joe Montana. Ken Stabler is in the Hall of Fame. Now go to the offensive line, because what was happening in the trenches of this team is something that football historians still cannot fully explain. On the left side of that offensive line, Art Shell and Gene Upshaw played next to each other for years in a partnership that no team in the league could match. Art Shell was a left tackle of such rare physical ability, 6 feet 5 inches tall, weighing over 280 pounds, with the footwork of a defensive back, that offensive line play had to be reimagined after watching him. He was an 8-time Pro Bowl selection. He and Upshaw shared that left side of the line for 5 seasons, in which the Raiders won 4 AFC West Division titles. Art Shell is in the Hall of Fame. Gene Upshaw played 15 seasons and was selected to 7 Pro Bowls. He anchored that offensive line with intelligence and technique that made the entire offense function at a level it could not have reached without him. Gene Upshaw is in the Hall of Fame. Now move to the receivers. Fred Biletnikoff was named the most valuable player of Super Bowl XI, the game that finally delivered the championship Al Davis had been building toward for over a decade. He was not the fastest receiver on the field in any game he ever played. He was the most precise, the most technically refined, the most obsessively prepared. His route running was surgical in a way that defensive backs described as maddening to try to cover. He played 12 seasons as a Raider and made 6 Pro Bowls. Fred Biletnikoff is in the Hall of Fame.
At tight end, Dave Casper, the Ghost. A player who combined the size and blocking ability of an offensive lineman with the receiving skills and football intelligence of a wide receiver. He made 5 Pro Bowls in 6 seasons and was selected to the All-Pro team 4 times. When John Madden was inducted into the Hall of Fame and gave his speech, he talked about the pleasure of having a player like Casper who showed up ready for every single game without exception. Dave Casper is in the Hall of Fame. Now go to the defense and understand that the offensive collection just described was only half of what made this team extraordinary. Willie Brown had been playing cornerback in the AFL and NFL since 1963. By 1976, he was the veteran cornerstone of the Raiders secondary, the player who had pioneered the physical bump-and-run coverage technique that would eventually transform how cornerbacks were coached across the entire league. He made 9 Pro Bowls and intercepted 54 passes in his career. The league eventually named the bump-and-run illegal contact rule after Mel Blount of Pittsburgh, but every cornerback who perfected that style learned it from watching Willie Brown of Oakland. Willie Brown is in the Hall of Fame. At linebacker, Ted Hendricks, called the Mad Stork for his impossibly angular 6'7" frame and the total unpredictability with which he disrupted opposing offenses. He had been an All-Pro multiple times before he even arrived in Oakland. He blocked 25 kicks in his career. He made 8 Pro Bowls. He won 4 Super Bowls across his career, one of them with the Raiders. Ted Hendricks is in the Hall of Fame. And at punter, Ray Guy, the only punter in NFL history who was selected in the first round of the NFL draft purely on the basis of his punting ability. His hang time was so extraordinary that for years, scouts and coaches believed the stopwatch clocks were malfunctioning. In 14 seasons, every single one of them as a Raider, he made 7 Pro Bowls and 3 All-Pro teams. He punted in 3 Super Bowls. He is the only pure punter in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Ray Guy is in the Hall of Fame. And alongside these names on that 1976 roster, Ron Wolf, the scout who identified and assembled much of this talent for Al Davis before building the roster of the Green Bay Packers as their general manager in the 1990s, guiding them to a Super Bowl of their own. Ron Wolf is in the Hall of Fame. 10 Hall of Famers connected to one roster in one single season.
But here is the question that the league never wanted to answer, the question that the hatred was really about. If this team was so extraordinarily talented, if it was populated by Hall of Famers at nearly every position on the field, coached by a Hall of Famer, assembled by a Hall of Fame owner, why did the rest of the NFL treat them like criminals? The answer requires going back to the week of September 13, 1976, the very week of the season that would end in a Super Bowl championship. Before a single regular season game had been played in that championship year, before any of those 13 wins had been recorded, an event occurred that captured everything the rest of the NFL believed about the Oakland Raiders. In the season opener against the Pittsburgh Steelers, the defending Super Bowl champions, the team that had eliminated Oakland in consecutive championship games, Raiders safety George Atkinson delivered a hit to the back of the head of Steelers wide receiver Lynn Swann. Swann was not even the intended receiver on the play. The ball had not gone anywhere near him. Atkinson had delivered a deliberate, calculated forearm to the skull of a man who was not involved in the action. Swann went down with a concussion. The officials saw nothing. No flag was thrown. The following day, Pittsburgh head coach Chuck Noll held his regular weekly press conference. He was asked about the hit, and what he said entered the permanent vocabulary of professional football. "There is a certain criminal element in every aspect of society," Noll said. "Apparently, we have it in the NFL, too." The criminal element. That was the phrase. That was the accusation delivered on behalf of a city, a fan base, and an entire coaching staff at the most visible institution in American sport. The Pittsburgh Steelers head coach was calling the Oakland Raiders criminals in the most direct public language available to him. What happened next was quintessentially Oakland Raiders. George Atkinson, with the full support and legal backing of Al Davis, filed a $3 million defamation lawsuit against Chuck Noll, the Pittsburgh Steelers organization, and the Oakland Tribune columnist who had written that Atkinson could have killed Swann instead of giving him a concussion and might have faced a murder charge. The trial began in July 1977. It lasted 10 days. Sports Illustrated described it as a spectacle so bizarre and so beyond the realm of common sense that it might have been the creation of some mad comic producer. Terry Bradshaw testified, Franco Harris testified, John Madden testified, Pete Rozelle testified, Al Davis testified. The entire charade of the NFL's carefully constructed image of sportsmanship and excellence was laid open in a San Francisco courtroom for anyone paying attention to see.
Atkinson lost the lawsuit, but during the proceedings, Noll was forced to acknowledge under oath that some of his own defenders played in ways comparable to the behavior he had publicly condemned. The league fined Atkinson $1,500. The league fined Chuck Noll $1,000 for publicly criticizing a player on another team. The most hated team in professional football walked back onto the field after that trial, won 13 games, crushed Pittsburgh in the AFC Championship, and brought the first Super Bowl championship in franchise history back to Oakland. They did not apologize. They did not moderate. They did not adjust anything about who they were to make the league more comfortable. They won, and they brought 10 Hall of Famers with them. Here's what makes this story more than a collection of football facts and memorable controversies. The Oakland Raiders of the 1970s represent the most dramatic and permanent proof that the NFL's idea of respectability has never been a reliable measurement of excellence. The league wanted order. Al Davis gave it greatness and refused to apologize for either the method or the outcome. The commissioner wanted compliance. Davis gave him a 3-decade war that ended with the commissioner crying at a press conference and voluntarily stepping down from the most powerful position in the sport. The other coaches wanted the Raiders to tone it down, to stop playing on the edge, to become the kind of franchise that generated good press and clean headlines and polite losses. The Raiders gave him 10 Hall of Famers and a championship. Gene Upshaw once said of Al Davis, "Wherever you go, you are the Oakland Raiders. It did not matter who you were before you arrived. What mattered was what you were willing to become once you put on the silver and black."
That was what the hatred was really about. Not the hits, not the lawsuits, not the criminal element trial in a San Francisco courtroom. It was about the fact that a man operating entirely outside the establishment, assembling talent the establishment had rejected or feared or misunderstood, had built something that the establishment, with all of its resources and all of its respectability and all of its rules, could not match. They could call you a criminal, they could fine you, they could put you on trial, they could write the rules specifically to stop you, but they could not put 10 Hall of Famers on their sideline. Only one team in the history of the National Football League has ever done that, and the NFL hated every single second of it.